The Asian Tour has wrapped up, and Barcelona come back to Europe with a perfect record from out east, though it really wasn't ever in much doubt. That said, I still think we did learn quite a bit from Hansi Flick and company. Welcome to episode 707 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Dan Hilton, and I want to again thank everybody for helping out on YouTube. I got a huge number of subscribers last month, taking me over the 30,000 subscriber threshold, a number that I could have never dreamed about when I started the channel, now going on 7 years, and with the podcast even before that. I would ask everybody to continue to help me out, subscribe on YouTube or follow along on the podcast apps. Helping me out on Patreon is a good way to not only get these shows without the ads, but also, again, to help me continue to make new shows. I'll also tell people to watch along for it next weekend. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to do it, but at this point, do show up on bigup.com because I should have this watch along against Como for the Juan Gamper Trophy game, which is really the official kickoff of the season. I feel like it is the most official, unofficial match that Barcelona have had for quite some time, and it usually does depend upon the opponent. Now against Como, I think it'll be quite some fun with Cesc Fabregas and a number of other players return to Catalonia. So that will be a good time. But in the meantime, let's hit the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 5-0 win over Daegu FC from South Korea. Our first headline is a gap in quality. Looking at these two squads, yes, of course, on paper, Barcelona have a lot more talent, but Daegu FC is also struggling in the K-League, which is the first division in South Korea. They're bottom of that division by 13 points. So on paper, Barcelona should have truly made this one a rout, even though they don't have their full match fitness of yet. Now, looking at those struggles, Hansi Flick was able to change around his starting 11 a bit, giving Dro the start. But I will also say that Dro likely started because of the injury to Fermin Lopez, who is dealing with a knock and was unavailable. Plus, we also saw Gerard Martin, again, as a left-footed center back with the injury concerns for everybody else throughout this season. I would expect that that might be something that Hansi Flick wants to make sure that he can trust. Inigo Martinez is currently dealing with an injury. We know that Christensen is somebody that's not always healthy every season, and the same can be said for Ronald Araujo. And of course, at the end of this, we'll talk about Cubarsi. So with all the other injuries to center backs, having Gerard Martin as a backup left center back option, well, it's not so bad. And I will also say with Gerard Martin at this point that his ability to get in on a cross and potentially overlap with the left back, that's also not necessarily a bad thing. We saw one of the goals scored that way. And as far as a reactive defender, I'm not sure he does have the speed to deal with the wingers, but having him be more reactive, to be able to get into position, maybe he is somebody that can actually have the best of himself as a center back, a position that he did play in his youth. So it's not something that's completely unknown to him. Gerard Martin, I've mentioned before how I believe his ceiling to be, but I also don't want to count him out. He's a Barcelona player, and he could be improving. And he also might be a better player at center back than left back, and time will tell. That said, I thought Barcelona were a bit sloppy to start this game. Daegu FC, if they had timed things right on the offside trap, could have been up by 1 or 2 goals in the first 4 minutes of the game. And Barcelona on their passing, a bit sloppy. And not like Daegu FC was pressing them in any way that should have caused difficulty. That said, Barcelona did settle down by the 9th minute. Here's Lamine Yamal. He was kind of stuck in the fog in the first few minutes of the game, but once that all cleared, Lamine Yamal was tremendous here. Tremendous dribble, but he couldn't get the dink over. I will say, in terms of criticism, Balde, I'm not worried about him at all, but on that artificial turf, the ball was bouncing a lot, and Balde had a bit of trouble. They were filtering the ball to his side, and his passing just wasn't good enough to start. 16th to 19th minute, though, Barcelona, as I said, were settling down in the game. It was all Blaugrana at that point. Dro, Rafinha, both getting their chances, both missing their chances, which said isn't a bad thing. There are going to be a lot of chances over the course of a season, and when you make that many big chances, you're going to miss some. So again, in the preseason, I'm not worrying about it. We can talk about it if that was the one chance that those players had got in the semifinal of a Champions League, whatever. Gavi also, from the jump of this game, pushing for that starting job. We know just through energy, but we're also now talking about quality. And you could see that jump in quality in the midfield with Gavi and De Jong against Daegu FC's midfield. 20th minute, Barcelona were lucky. Again, Daegu in transition. Joan Garcia didn't have anything to do in this match except come out on this one cross, which he did misplay with the ball bouncing pretty quickly. And then it was just a stone cold miss from Daegu FC, who should have been up 1-0 at that point. And yet, if you don't take your chances, immediately the other way, Barcelona up 1-0. It's Gavi with an aim and a fire from outside the box, Dro and Lamine Yamal running together, and Yamal finds Gavi around the top of the 18. As I said, you give a good player like that time to aim and shoot into the bottom corner with his left foot, by the way, so his opposite foot. That two-footedness from Gavi, both in tackles and with the shot now, reminding you how good Gavi is, and reminding you that he is a Copa Trophy winner. He was voted the best under 21 player in world football just a few seasons ago prior to the ACL. Don't forget about that. I'm going to give more compliments to Gavi in a second. Because headline 2 is Asian Tour MVP Gavi. There it is. I think Gavi has been the best player for Barcelona throughout this preseason tour. And I think back to that month and a half before he succumbed to the ACL injury, now going on 2 years ago, Gavi was the best player for Barcelona in that September and early October period before he went down. Gavi is still a top talent. And this Asian Tour, if I have one big takeaway, is that Gavi has reminded us of that. Now, the conversation about Casado potentially to Manchester United, even Fabrizio Romano threw cold water on that, and Fermin Lopez potentially having a 70 million euro number being put on him by Barcelona. I think both of those two are sticking around because, yes, while it is 5 really good players who could all start, and Bernal will be brought back in a bit slower, so really you're talking for the first few months, 4 players in De Jong, Gavi, Pedri, and Casado for 2 positions. But with the number of competitions and the fact that you get 5 subs, I think all 4 of them, and also staying healthy is a big part of it too. So there will be minutes for all 4 of them, and then plus Bernal, all 5 of them this season. I'm not worried about that. And with Olmo not always being healthy, with Fermin Lopez, let's see if he is healthy. There will also be time potentially at the 10 for Gavi or Pedri to take those spots as well and eat up some minutes late in games or whatever it is. I do think that there will be enough minutes for everybody. I wouldn't sell Fermin or Casado. I do think, though, the club is kind of dangling those names out there because they're La Masia players. That money that comes in for transfers goes directly to the wage bill. You're not worrying about amortization or any of the technicalities like that. They sell La Masia players. That helps your wage bill like for like. The inverse of that, though, is that those two do not make a lot of money. So it's not like getting those wages off your books is really going to help you a lot. It's really just a transfer fee that they would bring in. And I think the club should hope that they can get other money around the edges to at least get these players registered. Then you worry about getting back in the stadium by January. And now, and I do say this every time, but then hopefully Barcelona are in better shape at that point. Because remember, they're also now paying a higher wage for Lamine Yamal, who does look to be worth every single euro that he is at right now, at still less than 17 million euros, which might wind up being an absolute steal for what Lamine Yamal has showed us this season. The extra bit of weight that he's put on looks to be helpful. It doesn't appear to have affected his dribble at all. It was a worry that some people had, but no, he looks as unstoppable as ever. It doesn't matter how many defenders you throw at him. The 27th minute, though, Lamine Yamal didn't have to be involved here with the 2-0. Gerard Martin getting to where he is really comfortable on the crosses on that left wing. It was Rafinha who dropped in, who did kind of make all this happen. It was an overlap from Gerard Martin with Balde also tucking in, and then Gerard Martin delivers the final ball on a platter for Lewandowski tap-in. Lewandowski didn't really do much in this game, but he didn't have to. This season, he might, with all the creativity from Lamine Yamal and the number 10 spot, and potentially having more quality on that left wing through Rashford late in games. Lewandowski, yeah, he's going to eat. He's going to get the goals, so I still would expect at least 25 from him this season. And he reminded you here on a tap-in that he'll find himself in good goal-scoring positions. 39th minute, Dro misses a sitter from Balde. It's really high bounce on the turf. Hard to fault him, is also a bit behind him, but it is something we did see all morning in this match. That said, Toni Fernandez, if there is time for him, if Olmo goes down for any bit of time, if Fermin Lopez goes down for any bit of time, Toni Fernandez will be on the bench. It's probably better to even have him on the bench and prepared to come in matches for the first team than to potentially be playing in the 4th division of Barca Athletic, because Toni Fernandez, what he showed us was a similar thing that Toni Fernandez actually showed me last preseason, that, yeah, this kid's pretty much ready. If anything, I think Dro is a bit more advanced than Toni even was last preseason. And with Toni Fernandez being just, yeah, let me say this very slowly, 17 years old, yes, we can both be patient, but also expect that he could get minutes because he is good enough already. He gets a goal. This was a 10 of 10 for a preseason tour for a player that we knew was good on the ball, but was he just good at the U19 level? Remember, he didn't really play much for Barca Athletic last season at all. He was primarily a U19 player playing in the UEFA Youth League. So to make this jump up to the first team, he looks more than ready. His close control, as Arsene and I said even a few months ago, could potentially be the best in the entire academy. It's basically Kim Junet and Dro Fernandez in terms of first touch in the entire academy. Those two almost on an island on their own. And he showed you in this first team tour why he's such a promising prospect. And from a current promising prospect to a former one in Gavi, here's the 3-0 coming in stoppage time of the first half after a corner. So it's Araujo and the like way upfield, and all that confusion. Koundé gets the through ball to Gavi, and Gavi chips the keeper. Araujo slamming it in to leave no doubt. But this one had already crossed the line. So Gavi gets credit for the goal. And I will reiterate this point again. Gavi and Pedri, whatever goal scoring they give you is just a cherry on top of all that they give you when they're on the field. And for De Jong, he was good enough in this preseason tour. I didn't really mention him here in the first half, but he basically played as a 6, allowing Gavi to be an 8. So it really wasn't a double pivot truly. It was Gavi pushing forward more and De Jong cleaning everything up in behind, which he did. He did his job today. And it does make you wonder that Barcelona would probably be best with Pedri and Gavi and De Jong because they probably give you a higher ceiling. But functionally, this system works best with a 10. And Gavi and Pedri are not as good as the 10 position as Olmo and Fermin are. Now, Fermin, I'm not entirely sure. I think Gavi or Pedri might be able to do a similar job, but he just gives you a different profile. And for Hansi Flick, this is a good problem to have 3 players who should definitely be starting in your double pivot in Gavi and Pedri and De Jong, but you can only pick 2 of them if you are going to go with the 10, which I think does support the best version of your system. Now, if too many 10s go out, instead of putting Dro Fernandez there for any bit of time, or instead of moving Rafinha over there, I think maybe you do go with Gavi or Pedri in that position, and then you trust the other 2. And a reminder that Costa also available for that, as we'll talk about here in the second half. Headline 3 is luxury on the left for the second half, an all-new starting lineup with Toni Fernandez playing on the left wing, Rashford at the 9. And it was interesting to see him, that being Rashford, in front of Olmo with Rooney to the right, Pedri and Costa, the pairing in the midfield. When we talked about Rashford with my friend Tom Verdi a few weeks ago, we did talk about where was going to be the best version of him. And it could be that he has to be on the field, whether he's playing on the left wing or as the number 9. Rashford, Toni Fernandez, and Joffrey Torrens, again, with Rashford being most comfortable coming from the left. All 3 of those started the second half with a lot of good energy. Was happy to see that they were settling down, that being Barcelona, into this match as Daegu FC didn't make as many subs and were slowing down. In the 54th minute, we saw some combination between Toni Fernandez and Joffrey Torrens. The kids playing the 1-2. They win a corner. And then the 4-0. Speaking of kids, Toni Fernandez, still just 17 years old. He just turned 17, by the way, last month, playing through the middle. This goal is built by Olmo, and Olmo, also bright in this match, uses Rashford as his reference point and gets the ball back. One times it for the run from Toni Fernandez, and he finishes confidently. So the 4-0 at that point through Toni Fernandez, who now scored in back-to-back preseasons, and another kid who is just ready. You can let me know in the comments or hit me up on social media if you're listening. Is Toni Fernandez somewhere around the first team? Rooney Baji was another example. I thought he had good moments, was a bit more direct, and maybe that was on purpose. He wasn't necessarily the dribbling type that he was in his youth, but more of the, hey, let me get to my spot and get this shot off. Maybe he was pushing, maybe trying to impress, but there was still some bright spots for him in this preseason tour for sure. So again, let me know. Do you go Toni Fernandez or do you go Rooney Baji? Headline 4 is Rashford at the 9. Olmo in the 59th minute gets a shot off after what I thought was his 15 best minutes of the preseason. He's somebody that consistently struggles for match fitness, but when he has been fit, there's an argument that Olmo has been just as valuable for Barcelona as De Jong and Pedri and Gavi. This version of Barcelona, it does succeed when your 10 is involved. And Dani Olmo in tight spaces, it doesn't get much better in world football. And I think people disparage him a bit too much for his injuries, and it did take him last season some time to come back. I didn't feel like he ever fully regained his match fitness after he had that injury in the spring. So getting him fit is going to be really important. We'll see if Hansi Flick and the club's physios were able to get him healthy and on the right fitness regimen the way they did with Pedri last season. Let's see if Pedri can stay healthy again too. The 5-0, there are bodies crashing in the box. Rooney got wiped out as he released it to Eric Garcia, and Rooney also, with getting wiped out, delayed the defender to create a bigger window for Eric Garcia to hit Rashford, who found a ton of space inside the box. Predatory instincts on the ball from Rashford. And this goal, be a reminder that he scored 30 goals in the 2022-23 season. And he did so primarily on the left, but he also scored almost double-digit goals through the middle. His versatility is part of the package and what makes him good enough to be on the field and good enough at two positions to earn those minutes, regardless of where Hansi Flick wants him. It had me on the watch along, also wondering if the potential buffer next season, if Lewandowski does go, would be asking Rashford and Ferran Torres to score a combined 50 goals from the number 9 spot, and that is a possibility. I don't want to get too far ahead of us because we have an entire season to go through, and Rashford is just on loan, but there are so few number 9 options in world football. The big crown jewel does seem to be Erling Haaland. Laporta mentions, or at least in the background, does mention him quite often. And when we look at A, the price for number 9s, and B, a number 9 that can do what Barcelona number 9s have done this whole 21st century, whether it was Rivaldo, whether it was Samuel Eto'o, even Ibrahimovic for a quick minute there, and Luis Suarez, and of course Messi when he played the false 9, and Lewandowski. There is something in common that all of those number 9s have that not every number 9 who is purely just a number 9 has in world football. The reason why Isak gets mentioned the way he does is because he's got a little bit of ability on the ball, and Rashford does. Would you say that he could play in the midfield? No, not necessarily, but he showcased in this preseason that he will be comfortable dropping into the midfield and moving that ball and a good first touch and playing off his teammates. And he just might be the answer that Barcelona need, where if you don't have to worry about the number 9 spot for Barcelona, at least for the next 2 or 3 seasons, what a godsend that would be. And it's too early to tell, but this preseason just has me thinking about some potentially very, very good things for Barcelona. Rooney, for all his shooting and lack of dribbling, did force the goalkeeper to make a few saves. And speaking of goalkeepers, Diego Cochin comes in for Tech in the second half to get his cup of coffee so that everybody did play in the preseason, except unfortunately for Inaki Peña, who will likely be gone from Barcelona almost the minute that plane lands back in Catalonia. Pedri, throughout that game, very little to say about him because he was in second gear, which is great. Just keep Pedri healthy, have him in second gear. It's a lot more control for the second unit. But he did his job. There was a lot more control for Barcelona against a ever-tiring Daegu side. And he also did get his one highlight there, delivering a delicious ball to Toni Fernandez on diagonal. Unfortunately for Toni Fernandez, couldn't get it on frame. And as I said, Joffrey Torrens next to Toni Fernandez was good when he got forward, enough where I do wonder if we just see him on the first team bench. Now, I don't know if there's going to be enough spots on that first team bench for everybody. We do know that Toni Fernandez and Guy Fernandez, they are either going on loan or going back to Barca Athletic, and Hector Fort is likely gone. So there could be spots on the bench. La Liga is a little bit of a shorter bench than the Champions League, so I do expect, at least for the Champions League, that Joffrey Torrens will likely do the UEFA Youth League stuff maybe in the morning. Actually, he might even be on that level at that point, so maybe not. He'll just be on the first team bench. So I do expect, of course, Joe Fernandez and Joffrey Torrens. It was Hansi Flick with this tour showing his hand, that they plus Toni Fernandez, those are the 3 academy prospects who could be around the first team dynamic more than any other this season. Then headline 5, we'll be quick here, ending with some bad news. Bad news for Cubarsi. He goes down with what looks to be a left leg injury. He's the one center back that you'd expect to generally stay healthy with Inigo Martinez, Christensen, and Araujo. So this is kind of bad news. By the time this is out, we'll probably have an update. Hopefully it was just precautionary from the player, knowing that while he does want to play every minute he can, just going down and saying, all right, let's get some fitness, figure some things out later. So Eric Garcia moves over to center back, and Hector Fort gets his run out. What an interesting way to probably have your last minutes for FC Barcelona in a game that you weren't supposed to play in, and then he's forced in, and he does fine, and that's what Hector Fort is. He's unfortunately on the depth chart behind Koundé and Eric Garcia, and those guys are both in their mid-20s, so Hector Fort is probably going to have to find first-team football elsewhere. And Barcelona looking for money, I would expect that they're going to sell him on with some kind of buyback. I don't think it's going to be a loan. If I had to guess, it's going to be a buyback for him, because I know people do like him on the left side, but I'm not even sure if he's really competing with Gerard Martin now we're seeing. Joffrey Torrens might have impressed Hansi Flick enough, and Joffrey Torrens does have a higher ceiling than Hector Fort. I think that's a statement that I wouldn't have said even 2 years ago, but it is. Joffrey Torrens physically just jumped up. He sprouted up overnight, and that more physical body and taller body is supporting the technical skills that he had at a younger age. So Joffrey Torrens looks like the real deal. He's also a natural left-footed player at left back, where Hector Fort is playing on his opposite side. So that's why Hector Ford is gone. And a reminder, too, that the harsh truth of first team football is that not everybody's going to make it. And Hector Ford may have made it in other years and other times. I think back to when Barcelona bought Serginho Dest. Would have been a perfect time for Hector Ford at that time, but the timing just wasn't right at the time. So that's probably why Hector Ford won't see his time at Barcelona come to fruition, with almost nothing against the player. It's just that it didn't work out for him. Last season would have been his year, but he would have had to play on his wrong foot. And Jari Martin is a left-footed player. Jofre Torrens is a left-footed player. And Balde is a consummate starter. It's unfortunate, but just not enough minutes to go around. We will see how Hansi Flick and who he trusts setting up more minutes. I think the starters will play longer next Sunday for the Joan Gamper Trophy. And I remind you, please join me on Big Up on the watch along for that. In the meantime, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Patreon, help me out on the podcast apps. And until next time, Forza Barca.